Welcome back, snow lovers, to another midweek ski roundup from across the Alps. And after the excitement of last week, this week has turned out to be decidedly more mundane. Indeed, you could almost say disappointing for those of us who love the snow. We've lost the cold northerlies, and they've been replaced by mild southwesterlies, so it is now significantly warmer at all levels than it was a week ago. But all is not lost. We still have plenty of snow to ski on in all but the lowest of resorts, and broadly speaking, the base is holding up pretty well. The tail end of last week saw occasional light snow across the northern and western portion of the Alps, with more significant snowfalls down in the Alps Maritime. But further south and east, particularly south of the main Alpine Divide, we've still seen very little precipitation so far this winter. Indeed, where the base depth in France and western Switzerland is currently very good for the time of year, in much of Italy, with the exception of the far northwest around Aosta region, things are looking decidedly dry. So if you've been in parts of the Dolomites and southern Tyrol, for example, you might have been wondering what all the fuss was about last week, as you would have seen very little of the major snowfalls that the northern and western Alps had experienced. And the same goes for some of the deep alpine valleys in the central alpine chain, such as Zermatt in Switzerland and Heiligenbrut in Austria. Through the weekend, a weather front crossed the Alps, heralding in the warm Atlantic weather. Initially, this brought quite humid, heavy, damp snow at mid-mountain in many areas, but eventually this would have turned to rain virtually everywhere, with the freezing level going up to around 3,000 metres. On Monday and Tuesday this week, it has become exceptionally warm, with the freezing level, particularly in the western portion of the Alps, in places reaching 3,600 metres, which is pretty exceptional for the time of year, and not the kind of exceptional that we want to be seeing. Further east, freezing levels are a bit lower, but they are still much higher than they should be. The mild air has reached everywhere in the Alpine range now. In spite of this, many ski areas kicked off the winter season this last weekend on the 6th and 7th of December, and many of those which were already opened yet more terrain this weekend, with the likes of the Three Valleys opening up their link-ups and their liaisons, so that it is now possible to ski right across from Courchevel to Val Thorens and back. Indeed, in Netanya in the Three Valleys, they're reporting that this is possibly the earliest it's ever been possible to ski all the way down to resort, down the Folies Piste, perhaps ever. So conditions are clearly still great in the likes of the Three Valleys, in spite of the rain which they would have now experienced down at resort level. Unfortunately, some resorts which had initially opened ahead of schedule have since closed again to preserve the snow that they have left, and they will then reopen again on either the 13th or 20th of December as they initially had planned. But it's still good news for them that they were able to get open for a few days ahead of schedule and bring in some much needed income before the main start of the season. For the rest of this week, and likely beyond into the following weekend, freezing levels are set to come down a couple of notches from the extreme highs we have experienced at the start of the week, but they're still well above average for the time of year. We're very much in the warm air mass. We're currently sitting south of the jet stream under a big area of high pressure, and that's not moving anywhere anytime soon. But with it being high pressure at least, the weather will often be pleasant, skies will be clear, winds will be light, which means it will be pleasantly sunny and enjoyable in the day, but also temperatures will still plummet at night. So it'll still be very cold and crisp and feel quite wintry in the deep valleys first thing in the morning. So, in spite of the high freezing levels, snow loss will continue to be quite slow. The sun is very weak at this time of year, and without any rain to wash it away, much of the snow that we do have will now remain. On-piste conditions will still remain fair. It'll likely become a little bit spring-like on particularly sunny or high traffic areas, but on the whole, the snow should hold up pretty well throughout this period of quite warm weather. Off-piste, the snowpack should be stabilising and consolidating throughout this week, as the previous snowfall for the weekend, being very wet, damp and heavy, was also very prone to slide, very avalanche prone. But the worst of the instabilities should have all sloughed off within the first day or so, and from then on in, the snowpack will be heating up during the day, cooling down again during the night, which will then help to bind it all together, so in the long run, everything should be much more stable after this period of high pressure. Once high pressures establish themselves over continental Europe, they become very hard to shift. You develop quite a blocking pattern. So it's impossible to say when we will see a return to a more mobile, more active weather pattern. So we may well have to wait quite a while for our next period of snowfall, unfortunately. We are now beginning to see signs in the more long-term forecasts of the weather returning to something a bit more seasonal towards the latter part of the following week and heading in towards the Christmas week. Which if it does, then that of course will be very, very welcome, with some fresh snows potentially in the forecast in the build-up to Christmas. But that's still a long, long way off. A lot can change by then, so I wouldn't be putting your bets down on whether it'll be a white Christmas or not just yet. To give a quick roundup of reported snow depths across the Alps, and starting in Slovenia in the east, Kranjska Gora are reporting a base depth on the lower slopes of 20 centimetres and on the upper slopes of 30 centimetres, but their last meaningful snowfall was way back on the 25th of November, so things are looking very, very lean out there in the east at the moment. Moving across to eastern Austria, and Schladming reporting a snow depth on the upper slopes of 60 centimetres and lower slopes of 10 centimetres, and again the last meaningful snowfall occurring on the 25th of November, so it's equally dry in eastern Austria as it is in Slovenia at the moment. A little further west in the Austrian Tyrol, things are of course looking much healthier, owing in a large part to the altitude of those resorts, particularly the glacier resorts. So Stubai Gletscher reporting a base depth on their upper slopes of 110 centimetres and lower slopes of 30 centimetres, and they received around 7 centimetres of fresh snow at the start of this week, Monday the 8th of December. Likewise, Pitztal are reporting an upper base depth of 160 centimetres and a lower base depth of 35 centimetres, and they also received around 7 centimetres of snow on Monday the 8th of December. Moving across to Switzerland, and St Moritz reporting an upper base depth of 65 centimetres, lower base of 18 centimetres, with just a very light dusting of snow on Monday the 8th of December of around 1 or 2 centimetres. Grindelwald have an upper base depth of around 50 centimetres and lower base of 10 centimetres, and again they received around 4 centimetres of snow on Monday the 8th. Verbier have an upper base depth of 60 centimetres and a lower base depth of 27 centimetres, and they received around 14 centimetres of fresh snow on Sunday the 7th of December. And Zermatt have an upper base depth of 85 centimetres, lower base of 15 centimetres, and they also received around 14 centimetres of snow on Sunday the 7th. Moving south into Italy, and it's currently very dry on many of the country's ski resorts, with Cortina in the east reporting an upper base depth of only 30 centimetres and lower base depth of only 5 centimetres. The last recorded snowfall of 4 centimetres on the 5th of December. So they're hoping that they get a lot more than that further on into the season ahead of the Winter Olympics. Likewise, in Livigno, they're reporting an upper base of 34 centimetres and a lower base of 14 centimetres, with just a couple of centimetres of snow falling on Monday the 8th of December. Further west, things are looking much healthier, particularly in the Ulster region, with Brulcervinia reporting an upper base depth of 85 centimetres, lower base of 15 centimetres, and they received 12 centimetres of snow on the 7th of December. And Cormier have upper base depth of 80 centimetres, lower base of 30 centimetres, and they received around 11 centimetres of fresh snow on Sunday the 7th of December. Further south, in the Via Latia, things are also looking much healthier, with Sestriere reporting a base depth of 95 centimetres on their upper slopes and 30 centimetres on their lower slopes, and they received around 5 centimetres of snow on the 4th of December. And last but not least France, who received the lion's share of the snow so far this season, and at Brevent-Frégère in the Chamonix Valley, the upper base depth is currently around 140 centimetres, and officially the lower base depth is 10 centimetres. But that is down in the valley bottom, the 10 centimetre snow depth. You can't actually ski down to the valley bottom, so in reality, the base depth at the bottom of the skiable runs is still over a metre, up at both of the mid-stations at Brevent and Frégère. Likewise, at Avoria in the Porte du Soleil, they now have a base depth on their upper slopes of around 120 centimetres and the lower slopes of 37 centimetres. I had reported previously that their base depth was over 150 centimetres, but it has of course now compressed down under its own weight, so still 120 centimetres is pretty healthy for the time of year. Things are also looking very healthy in Teens and in the Haute-Tarentaise, where they're reporting an upper base depth of 155 centimetres and a lower base depth of 40 centimetres. So that is in effect nearly half metre of lying snow at resort level in the town of Teens at the moment, which again is great going for the time of year. And last but not least, down in the Alps Maritime, where we saw the bulk of the snowfall around the middle of last week, and Isla 2000 have a base depth on their upper slopes of 65 centimetres and the lower slopes of 50 centimetres, and they received officially around 14 centimetres of snow on the 4th of December. So there you have it. That's a roundup of conditions as they stand in the Alps at the moment, and for now at least, west is definitely best, particularly north and west. On the whole, resorts in France, westernmost parts of Switzerland and the Aosta region in Italy have got above average snowfall for the time of year at mid elevations, but moving further south and further east, particularly going as far east as Sardinia and into the Dolomites, things are looking very, very dry at the moment. You've still seen very little snowfall across the Alpine Divide and onto the southern slopes of the Alps much further east. So while it's not panic stations just yet, definitely keep doing your snow dances if you are heading to the likes of the Dolomites, Southern Tyrol, or some of the more southern resorts in Switzerland over the coming weeks, because they could definitely do a good top-up of snow right now. So, thanks for listening, for those of you who've made it this far, and I'll be seeing you again at a similar time next week, and hopefully I've got something a little bit more exciting to talk about. Until next time.